Hi everyone, welcome to this Blinded by Technology webinar presented by Tom de Ruyck, Managing Partner at InSites Consulting, and Katja Palini. My name is Emily and I'm your host for today. Some practical details before we kick off. If you have any questions during or after the webinar, you can type them in the Q&A pane. We will make sure to answer them after the session. The recording will be shared with you by email after the session. With further ado, I now hand over the mic to Tom and Katja. Enjoy the session.
Thank you, Emily, for this introduction, and welcome, Tom. Thank you for joining us here today on the Blinded by Technology webinar. Also, a big welcome to our audience today. Blinded by Technology. So we're going to talk about the research trends of 2020. But before we start, Blinded by Technology, interesting title, and especially coming from you, Tom, because you've been at the forefront, I would say, of talking about the role of technology in business, but also in research and insights, and talking about how technology can play a big role. You talked even about bots in the past. So very interesting that this title comes from you. So where does this title come from? Are we in fact blinded by technology?
Well, I think a lot of investments and a lot of the attention in companies is indeed going to technology. But we can ask ourselves the question, is technology really the holy grail? Aren't we focusing too much on it? And maybe by focusing almost solely on it, aren't we missing out on other important things? So that's why the title, Blinded by Technology.
And you're saying missing out on things. Do you have examples of like things that businesses are missing by focusing so much on technology?
Yeah, I would like to maybe give three examples from three marketing domains, if you want. Customer experience, innovation, and the world of branding and communications. First, customer experience. I recently had a trip to China, which I thought would be a great adventure. Because to get to my destination, I had to, of course, take a plane, but also use the local public transport system and even take a boat. So I thought that will be quite adventurous, but it wasn't, because technology made it a very smooth journey and a very smooth experience. There were QR codes, there was facial recognition. I didn't even have to talk to people. So at the beginning, that was very interesting, even Instagrammable if you want. But after a while, I started to miss out on something, the kind of human aspect, the talking to people, the human surprises, human emotions, human empathy. And I think we also see that in other great examples of memorable experiences, great customer experiences. In most cases, it's not the technology that makes the difference, it's the human touch, the human element. And in the world of innovation, we often say, like, if you're Amazon, if you are a company like Alibaba, you have all the data in the world.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So why do we still need classical interaction with consumers to understand what they are looking for? Can't we just not leverage that data? And I think even if you have all the data in the world, just like those giants, I think we will never understand why people want something, and we will definitely not understand what they want to buy that is not really already there, their unmet needs. So we still need that kind of human interaction to get to the human understanding that we need. And then finally, the world, I think, of everything that has to do with branding and communications. Little example from Japan. In Japan, there is an advertising agency that now has an AI system as its creative or strategy director. The AI system looks at campaigns from the past and how successful they were and derives like best practices from that. But I think what you would get if everybody is using such an AI system is campaigns that start to look all very much the same, like the example we see here on the screen. So again, we miss human creativity to take, let's say, those best practices to the next level.
And so you're saying we're missing human creativity, and is that also, are we also in fact blinded by technology, you would say, in research and insights? Do you see similar trends there? In our industry?
I think so. I think it's the same in research. for sure, in research, we still need to focus a lot on technology and transforming the research industry, taking it towards the digital world in the 21st century. I think still in research, we are a little bit in that twilight zone. We are with one leg in the old world, with one leg in the new world. So we, as soon as possible, need to fully digitally transform research to be able to get to insights better, faster, and cheaper, because that's what businesses need today. That's what they want. If we don't do that, we will become maybe irrelevant. Maybe other players, other functions, even in companies, will take over our role. So we need to do that. But I think maybe now you have a competitive advantage by doing that. But in the next couple of years, that will fade out. It will become a hygiene factor. It will be the new normal that you can get to insights better, faster, and cheaper. So it's time already to think about what's next and what should we invest in. And for me, that is that kind of human element. It's like, how are we going to combine the best of technology with the best of human? That's exactly the same, I think. Like
so you would in fact say that it's rather an and story rather than an or story, and that it's about really leveraging those human skills, or at least what we excel in comparison to technology, and find our strengths and really make sure that we really create that synergy with technology. What are, you would say, those human skills that we need to further invest in and leverage that you think are in fact complementary to those technology? Because we see technology in fact also growing, and where their AI is even creating paintings, and so it's really going far and beyond what we could have imagined 10 years ago. But what are we truly, you could say, unique at, and what are our true competences as a humans?
You're right. We should focus on the things that machines cannot do. And then the question is, what is that, and what will that be? I think it's first of all everything that has to do with empathy. So really understanding the emotional side of things, being able to step into the shoes of other human beings and how they think. I think it will be very difficult for machines to mimic empathy. I think most scientists agree about that. Secondly, it's everything that has to do with a deep understanding of human behavior, which is very complex. And then last but not least, it's everything that has to do with creativity and extreme creativity and a mindset of experimentation, which is also believed to be very difficult to be done by machines. So that are, for me, the three kind of aspects we should focus on more, next to, of course, still keep on investing in everything that has to do with technology.
Yeah, so you talked about, those three key elements. Now, looking ahead and looking at, okay, where can we really excel as in our industry, really creating that synergy between technology and the human aspect. Looking at the trends of 2020, what I see, especially talking to our end clients, is that today there's a lot of focus on, or even you could say pressure on, data analytics, meaning looking at, there's so much data available, and probably also our audience today will recognize this. We're in a world of data abundance, and where the challenge is in fact of really understanding and connecting the dots even, and understanding what can we learn from all those different data sources and bringing all those insights together. Do you recognize the strengths in data analytics? Is this something you are experiencing yourself?
There is definitely a lot of buzz among clients around this kind of topic. You hear it more and more. Before we do new research, we should first leverage everything that we already know. We should reuse the insights that we already have. We should make use of the data that is already in this house. So it's definitely something that is buzzing, that is trending. And I think it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to create those kind of repositories of insights. What do we know? What have we learned in other studies? It makes a lot of sense to first look at that before you do new research, to make sure that your new research really brings in fresh information and fresh insights. It makes also a lot of sense to bring all the data that you have within your company together so that it becomes like a gigantic database that you can use to ask questions to it. I think that's what Unilever does with their people data center, and they claim that 25% of the questions that they normally would tackle through fresh and ad hoc research can now be answered by the data that is already there, which is quite impressive, I think.
It is, yeah.
And it's a big saver of time and cost. So that's definitely something that a lot of other companies are looking into as well. And then finally, I think it's not only about using the data to answer questions that you have, maybe you can also go beyond and let data drive actions. And a nice example is something that our team in the Netherlands did quite recently for Q Music, which is a radio station in the lowlands. And what they did is, based on more than 1,000 advertising post tests, they actually created a little bit this kind of AI system that I talked about that the Japanese agency is using, where we'll look at which ads were successful and why were they successful based on how successful they were in the market, and the results from the post tests that give us the reason why they were successful. And if you do that, you can create a system that gives you those best practices, both for creation and for media planning. So I think we are just at the beginning of how we can leverage all the data that is already in-house.
So it's in fact really connecting the dots and getting that aggregated meta learning, you could say, and view and learning from the past to really be successful in the future.
Yeah, we could even call it hindsights if you want.
Yeah, so
just like we have insights, we have also hindsights we learn from the past.
And do you think companies need to invest in that more and more, or is it something that is already a practice? Because you gave some nice examples, but many times we're looking at it today and not to the past enough, I would say, right?
Yeah, it's definitely something that that companies start to invest in. But I think we are just at the beginning, and we see a lot of client-side organizations merging their analytics and their insights departments, which were in most companies separate entities, one more led by marketing, one more led by IT, and we see that most of the companies start to bring those two teams together under one roof. And I think that's the starting point to also use those kind of techniques that were traditionally used more in another kind of department, also in the world of insights. So yeah.
Maybe another buzzing topic, especially if you look at the past years, it was, I think, if you look at our industry, it was all about consumer centricity. Yeah. That was the buzzword. Every organization was consumer centric, driven by consumer insights. But I have the impression that today, also looking at what you can see on Congress stages at conferences, you see that it is becoming rather a hollow concept. And today, being or saying that you're consumer centric is not enough. And we see many also publications stating that the real challenge within organizations is to connect every stakeholder with consumer understanding and with consumers, because if you think about it, marketeers or R&D people, anyone within the company that is looking for client solutions or consumer solutions, many times they themselves are not their target consumer. And so there's often, you could say, still a gap. Even if you say you're consumer centric, I have the impression that the big buzz of today is really getting a real connection between consumers and internal stakeholders or company stakeholders. Do you recognize this? Or
I think you're right when you say that consumer centricity, everybody shouts about it, but not a lot of people give it a real meaning within their organization. Yes. I think companies start to realize that they need to start somewhere, and that somewhere is probably the very beginning, like reconnecting with consumers, because
starting with the
real basics, and not with big strategies, but with the real basics. We don't see our customers enough, we don't see our consumers enough, we actually live slightly different lives, we don't know how it is at the consumer side, we don't know who our average consumer is. Let's try to step into their shoes, let's try to gain some additional empathy for them. And they see that as the starting point.
And how can they do that? Because, I think it's probably an aha for everyone. Yeah, of course we have to connect with our consumers, but how how can you do that, especially looking at big organizations?
Yeah, we see a growing importance and popularity of what we can call consumer closeness programs or consumer connect programs. Very simple, sending out people, giving them specific missions to go and observe things in the real consumer world, to go and talk with real consumers and not their family members or neighbors, but real consumers of specific segments that they are serving. So those kind of very simple programs where maybe sometimes supported through an app, you get tasks, you get a certain amount of time to do those tasks, and you come back and you bring back what you have learned, but the learnings are not the most important thing. The interaction with consumers and the additional empathy that you have gained, that's what it's really all about. Because we have seen in several studies that if you don't have that empathy, if you don't have that connection with consumers, it's very difficult to understand an insight, which is the logical second step. First you have the empathy, and then we show you the insights. But because you have the empathy, it becomes very easy to understand what the insight is all about. And we have seen that in several studies that we have done that are written down in SMR papers, that if you want an insight to be really used and leveraged, you need to know what the insight is about. You need to be able to memorize the insight. You need to be able to understand it more from a technical point of view, but you also need to be able to feel it,
have that empathy,
and have that empathy. Otherwise, it's becoming very difficult to translate it in meaningful actions.
And just tapping into that, you talk about understanding the insight, and I think one of the big challenges, and perhaps also our audience can recognize this, is that a lot of our clients are at, you could say, sitting on a stack of meaningful observations, interesting observations about our consumer insights. However, the big challenge is not generating insights. There's a data abundance, as we mentioned, but talking about the empathy might also be important to activate insights. You have your own presentation and even a book seen on impact is the name of the game. And I think it's also what you're mentioning here today, that the big challenge today is not generating insights, but activating them in the organization so that stakeholders can really integrate them and turn them into actions and integrate them in their decision making. Do you have tips and tricks or things, quick wins that people can learn from, that you would say this is what what you can do to activate them?
Yeah, I think if we look at what should happen is we should add an experience to the kind of presentations and the kind of reports that we are delivering. An experience that helps to bring the insight to life and to start to activating that insight among the audience that is in the room, but later on indeed also among the whole organization. So we should pay more attention to that, to the kind of experiential element that we are delivering when we are actually presenting.
So you would say that research reports or presenting research results should be an experience.
It should be an experience.
Just like brands are turning into an experience, you see the growth of experience marketing. Research should also leverage that experience marketing or the tips and tricks of experience.
I think in the past it was all about data collection. Then we said, oh, it's not about the data, the observations, it's about insights. That was the next level. Then we started to think about how can we organize impactful presentations, how can we workshop things. That was at a certain point the big thing. I think now it's time to move on and to say, how can we indeed help people in the organization to memorize the insight and to have empathy for the insight, and how can we indeed create an experience that actually helps us to do those kind of two things. And if we do that, we activate the insight, because we have the two components that we need to make sure that people in the organization will start to use the insight. And that's, of course, the next step in their journey of becoming consumer-centric, having empathy, understanding insights, and using those insights to do things that customers want, consumers want.
Yeah, and do you have examples or some things that you have done that you see that really work?
I can give you 4 examples for small ones. The first one is that works more on memory, and it's really like interacting with the results, with the insights. A small example is something we have done a while ago for KLM Air France. It's called Concept Casino, because presenting a concept test or concept test results can be very
boring.
And it's not something that stimulates the mind. So we
true.
created like a casino board where we have on top the KPIs and we have on the side the different concepts, and we don't present the concepts and how well or how bad they scored in the consumer world. We look at KPIs and we try to see, for example, on appeal, which concept do you think in the audience,
placing your bet,
will score highest on appeal. So you start to think about what is my ideal concept looking like, rather than that you look at the report and the scores of each single concept. So it activates the mind. One day we had a lady who said, I will keep all my coins. I'm not betting because I think all my colleagues will have a draw. Talking about confidence in your colleagues and maybe lacking some empathy sometimes. This is a nice example, but it brings it activates the mind, and it brings a new kind of fresh dynamic in the room as well. Of course, you can also work on empathy by interacting with the consumer world. Example here is we once did a study for Heineken about the future of going out, and we literally went out together with the internal stakeholders to actually step into the world of the insights. So also interesting, because sometimes people then tell you, look, there is an insight happening, which is interesting if people start to think that way, that they literally see their insights being illustrated in the real world. Another example is what Skype does to actually present their NPS results every year. The whole philosophy there is the way you visualize something will have an impact on how people remember it and on how they memorize it. And they literally have like balls floating on air to present their NPS results. I think it's not something we can use tomorrow. We don't have that technology yet, I think, in the average boardroom, but it makes you think about how can we visualize things so that people will easily remember it. And then a last example is how we can use technologies like virtual reality to, in a more passive way, step into the shoes of consumers. And we already did projects where we filmed things in three dimensions, in 360, so that later on we could use that footage coming from, for example, a bathroom or a living room of a consumer to give internal stakeholders, for example, in global teams, a 10-minute tour around the world. Like in 10 minutes, you literally step into 10 living rooms of 10 different consumers.
Interesting. I wouldn't mind going on a tour like that.
So those kind of experiences, I think, will definitely work both on memory and on empathy.
I would say, in fact, it's about using creative techniques to really activate the insights and make people feel and experience the insights themselves.
It's using human creativity to make a presentation, a workshop, really an experience.
Did you, in fact, know that creativity is seen? It's this research by IBM amongst 1,500 CEOs, that creativity is the #1 leadership skill out there.
I'm not surprised.
More than vision and rigor. And if you then look at how people themselves perceive them as being creative, it's only 41%. And if you look at Japan, it's 13%. So we talk about the need for creativity, and people recognize it in business and, as you mentioned, also in research. However, it's clear that being creative or creatives are a rare breed. And how can we, in research, really leverage that creative angle? Because you also mentioned it, it's one of those 3 human skills that we excel in, more than technology. What can we do?
Maybe first, why is creativity so important in our jobs? I think creativity is important to activate insights. We just discussed that. But also, if you have an insight, I often get the question, can you make an insight unique for my company and my brand? Or when we do insights writing sessions, that's what they are sometimes aiming for, those marketing people. And I think it's impossible, because it's a consumer story. It tells something about a consumer needs, consumer wishes, which is something that is unique to consumers, but definitely not unique to your brand. Other brands can leverage and find that insight as well. It's only when you leverage the insight towards an idea, when you activate it towards an idea, that it becomes truly unique. And if you want to do that in unique ways that are different from the competition, that's where you need creativity. And I think more and more you see the tendency that research departments are asked to demonstrate their return on investment, are asked to demonstrate their impact. So I think that's why this field of creativity also becomes our job. We're not happy when we have an insight. We're only happy when the insight is being leveraged into something that is unique to the company, unique to the brand, which is an idea and later on a concept.
And then the big question is how?
How, yeah. You're right. Most companies are not creative. Most people in companies are not creative. And the simple reason is because companies are structured in certain ways, and that pushes out the people that really think out of the box. I think even in the study that you quoted, it's about creativity in general, but what we're looking for is extreme creativity, that really extreme creative people. And that's indeed a very rare breed in the sense that some studies say that it's only 1% of the global population. So we went on a lookout for where are those people, and we actually found last year a company called IKEA, which is one of the only platforms in the world that brings together all those creative 1%ers. They have 400,000 of them. So through our kind of collaboration with IKEA, we are now able to actually bring that extreme creativity into companies. So it's not that you need to hire those extreme creative people, because they will not stay in your company. Maybe they will sign their contract, but they will not stay. So you need to look for them outside of the organization. You need to crowdsource extreme creativity.
So for example, if you have an ideation challenge, you would tap into the crowd, get their sparks, their ideas to then indeed. Or how does it work? Do you have a concrete example?
Yeah, it's intelligence having fun. Like Albert Einstein said it very, very nicely. They are creative people, so they are like born with a certain gift. We brief them with intelligence, being the insights.
Yes.
They have fun because they love to think out of the box, and what comes out of the process is an idea. So the insight has been turned into an idea for communication, customer experience, or a new innovation for a new product or a new service.
Very interesting. I think we'll talk about that later on as well. Maybe jumping ahead on, we're going to talk about research trends, and one of the other trends is, and probably also our audience will recognize it as well, is the need for agile research. And agile is, again, just like customer centricity, an overly used word, even abused word, I would say. But I would probably say that a lot of research users or research professionals, especially in organizations, they say, oh, we need to do agile research, or they feel the pressure on, we need to do our research, needs to be faster, better, cheaper even, it needs to be agile. But what does agile mean, and what are things that we can really do to cope with that pressure on agility or more agility?
Yeah, I think it's indeed an overly used word. I would say it's a word I tend to use less and less, because when you say agile, a lot of people start to laugh in organizations. It's next to consumer centricity, one of those buzzwords that have become a little bit hollow, because everybody is using them and abusing them and misusing them. But I think it makes a lot of sense once you have a very beautiful idea, like the ones we get out of the IKEA kind of community, that you try to make them successful in the market, because you have an insight, you have an idea, then it's about making it a successful concept. Then once you have the concept, it's about a good prototype, and then it's about getting in-market success. So there is still a whole journey after you have that fantastic idea to turn that into success. And the current kind of business reality is that you don't have years to do that. It needs to go fast. It needs to be good. It needs to go fast. And you need to have a process underneath that is also helping you to save not only time but also money. And that's where the whole Agile idea, I think, comes in. I think Agile starts to be replaced a little bit by the word experimentation, that we do more experiments, and that's probably what it's really about, because it's there are so many aspects to Agile in the world of IT that it's sometimes difficult to translate it to the world of research and marketing. But I think what it all comes down to is getting in as soon as possible feedback from the market, from real consumers, from real customers, and making small steps, doing little experiments if you want. And by doing that, you get to a better product, a better version of your concept or of your prototype sooner. And I think the whole idea is very popular now in Western companies, but I think it's already something that has been used overly in Asian markets like China. You see a lot of Chinese companies being really successful very fast because they have that mindset of experimentation. They don't make big plans, they don't test everything in a kind of lab setting. They create something, they go to the market, and they learn from what the feedback of the first consumers and customers is. I think that's the kind of mindset we start to see in a lot of organizations.
It's really that iterative approach.
Iterative approach, going to the market first as soon as possible.
But in terms of, you said going to the market first, but the challenge is also on the research side, I would say, looking at not trying to measure everything at once, but really chunk it down and really getting to that learning by doing type of way.
Shorter pieces of research, smaller kind of steps that we take to be able to go as soon as possible to a consumer to have first feedback in. And I think it's all about more smaller pieces of research, smaller kind of steps that we take, and that's why that whole idea of experimentation is definitely probably a better concept that we can use to grasp all of that than the word Agile, which is a little bit burned, I think.
And do you have an example of like a concrete case that you've been involved in? Or
some clients sell their kind of prototypes on an e-commerce platform, and then we take those kind of first real users of a product of a prototype actually of a product to get in feedback to make that prototype better. Sometimes we create pre-launch test markets before the real launch. We already give access to a certain service or a certain product.
Really beta testing.
Beta testing almost. Could even be internally, like for PepsiCo, we did a project where the whole community of employees were those kind of beta testers. So if you have like the new digital tools like communities where you can literally follow 24/7 what consumers are doing with your product, how they are reacting to the communication you want to do about it, for example, you can almost have like a test market even before the launch of the product. And when the product is launched, you can talk to the beta users of the product, but the real customers, the real first consumers, which is really interesting to tweak it to bring a product to success as soon as possible.
And also to have this ongoing structural understanding and really keep on listening. In fact, it's not because you launch it that you leave it there and that you don't.
And what it in the end all comes down to is if you have a campaign, if you have a new kind of strategy, if you have a new product, if you have a new service, making sure that you can launch it sooner and that it becomes more successful sooner, because speed is an important variable these days, and that you are not wasting time and money on products that in the end are not a success, which is still the case. If you look at the world of advertising, a lot of ads are not delivering the return on investment, or a lot of campaigns are not delivering the return on investment we expect from them. A lot of products can still be considered 1 year after launch as a failure. So I think that this is where this comes from and where this fits in.
Maybe to wrap up also, if you look at, we talked about the importance of data analytics. You mentioned InSites, going back to past learnings, getting those extracting those overarching insights and learning from not only your mistakes, but also what were you good at. Like you gave the example of the radio station advertisements exercise where they looked at what are those success elements to then compose the ad of the future, you would say. We talked about the today, the need of generating insights and activating insights, but looking at the future and trends and so on, do you think we as an industry are focusing enough on that future perspective? For example, you have the McKinsey horizons, where it says, you have the today, the tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. What about the research industry? Are we ready for the day after tomorrow?
It's just like data analytics, something that companies start to invest in, and we already see in a study that we have done together with SMR that companies that invest in things like data analytics, being close to consumers, creativity, but also foresighting, are the ones that gradually are building up some kind of competitive advantage. So I think it clearly shows that also this is an area companies need to invest in. And of course, we're not going to be able to predict the future. We don't have those kind of magical tools to just look into a glass ball and to see, oh, this is what the future will look like. It's more like anticipating potential futures. It's about trying to capture the weak signals of change in society, turning those not into insights this time, but into foresights, and then trying to see what does that mean for our company? If this becomes a reality, how are we going to anticipate? What will be our game plan? What will be our battle plan? So I think definitely in a world that is moving fast, where change is going almost exponential, I think this is becoming more and more important, that we also have a fresh view on what will for our company and in the world of consumers be the most important things, the things that will be changing in the next 3 to 5 and even in the next 5 to 10 years. And how can we anticipate and how can we write scenarios actually for the future? And I think a nice example is what IKEA is doing. Of course, they are still investing in the today. They're having a lot of insights to make the current business model even better. But they also anticipate a future where if the trends that you see are going to continue, like people living more in big cities, young people not having cars anymore, their kind of old model comes under pressure because you need a car to get to an IKEA store, which is outside of the city center, and you need that very same car to bring all your stuff back. So they are investing in more kind of flagship stores in city to touch and feel the product, and then you get the product delivered at your doorstep through a delivery service, which is changing completely what they have done for the last decades. And then they even think about the next 5 to 10 years, if everything that has to do with conscious consumption and sustainability continues to be a hot topic, which it probably will be almost. For sure. This brings their model under pressure as well, because sometimes IKEA is considered as not something you keep for the rest of your life. So probably they need to create products that are more long-lasting, more sustainable in that sense. And again, it will create new business models and opportunities. They are even experimenting today and piloting a model where they let you rent furniture, lease furniture. So it becomes almost like a subscription to furniture rather than that you buy it. So you see how important it can be even for the really established companies to think about how will consumer behavior and consumer thinking and expectations, how will that evolve in the near future, and what can we do about it?
What would your key takeaway? We're talking about blinded by technology, the key trends of 2020. Now looking at the shift last year, this year, what is your key takeaway, or what would you give away to our audience here today? The key learning that you say, this is what you have to take from all of this, because we talked about a lot.
Yeah. I would like to mention 2 things, if I can.
You can.
The first thing is leave the twilight zone as soon as possible. So transform your research, digitally transform your research. Don't have one leg in the old world, one leg in the new world. Make sure that both legs are in the new world, because in the new world, you need to be able to run fast. What business expects from you is that you can deliver insights that are better, that are faster, and that are cheaper. And you will not be able to do that with a toolkit that is half-half. So transform your research. Focus first maybe on the technology, but also start to invest in those human elements that we talked about.
Yes.
So the hearts, the minds, and the actions. So give people back that empathy, hearts. Of course, keep on delivering great insights, minds to craft strategies, and also go beyond just being happy with, here are the insights, but try to help with bringing it into action. Only be happy when an insight has become a product, when it has become really tangible. And then the other two aspects, I think, are invest in data analytics and in foresights, or leverage the insights in the data that you already have, and try to have a fresh view on what your company should be doing in the future. And if we do that, if we jump out of the traditional box that we have created for ourselves by now, I think there is a bright future for every single researcher.
Yeah, so to wrap up, I would say it's about getting the pressure on better, faster, and cheaper research will always be there, but it's also getting into that empathy layer, the action layer, but also not only focusing on insights and need today, but going into hindsight, as you mentioned, and foresight.
And to refer to McKinsey again, probably it should be like 70-30, like still 70% of your efforts will go into the better, faster, cheaper, because that's the focus today. But you should already invest like 30% of your time, your money, your budgets into starting to prepare for all the other elements that we talked about.
I'm very curious how 2020 and beyond will turn out. Thank you, Tom, for your time, your insights, your views on this.
A lot of fun.
And I would say leave the floor, or I would say for questions. I don't know if there are any questions from your audience, but I would encourage you, if you have any questions, get in touch with Tom.
Yes, of course.
Tom is available. The email is right on the slide. Get in touch, and you will follow any questions, any discussion points. If you want to challenge Tom, that's also possible. Right?
I love
that. For now, I would say there are no questions. I would thank the audience for your attendance today. Again, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And as Tom ready to get to the future first, we are ready, right?
We are ready. Thank you.
So thank you for joining us.